Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. I've got another haul for you, but it's a bit different, this one. It's not just random stuff that I've grabbed and found in various dusty locations. This one's very strategic, very targeted, and it might be a way for you to find some interesting movies, not paying too much, depending, of course, on where you live. One of the things I did, which is for me a little bit unusual, is I took a look at Umbrella Entertainment's website. And they have a lot of DVDs, not Blu-rays or 4Ks, but DVDs, going really cheaply for as low as $5. A lot of them are very obscure science fiction and other genre movies that got a DVD release but really didn't get too much traction. And of course, Umbrella are trying to get rid of their old stock. And so you can dive in there, and I picked up a whole bunch of stuff quite cheaply. It's interesting to see what's there and basically buy a bunch of movies for whatever loose change has fallen down the back of the couch. And I found some pretty good movies, some science fiction as well. And two of them are movies that I'm going to review on Saturday for Science Fiction Saturday, along with another one I bought elsewhere. So the first part of this video is going to be the stuff I got cheap at Umbrella, and the next bit is the other pickups I've had in the last few days when a bunch of stuff that I'd pre-ordered came through. First video I've got is from a director whose grave I've been to. It's one of the few of this particular director I haven't seen, but I hear mixed things about, but I kind of like the idea of. I got this one for $5 from Umbrella on their website, which I'm going to post a link to. Jules and Jim, with Jean Moreau, Oscar Werner, Henri Serret, Marie Dubois. Music by Georges Delerue, who is a really good film composer. I haven't, I'm going to put it there so you can see the picture. I haven't seen it, and I want to see it. I know that a lot of people have mixed feelings about it, but for $5, a true phone movie, I'm going to go with it. It's in 16:9 aspect ratio. This one is region 4, so it's not for people who don't have a multi-region DVD player. But these days there are fewer and fewer of those kind of people. There's the back cover. I'm looking forward to that one. And I may put it towards the top of the pile along with the Fellini movies I haven't seen yet. So I got that. And this one, a science fiction movie, which I picked up very, very cheaply. It was from about 2022. Again, this is Region 4. It says, set in an alternative New York, the quantum computing revolution has begun and investors are lining their pockets. But building the network requires miles of infrastructure to be laid between huge magnetic cubes called cablers. A group of unprotected gig workers who have to compete against robots to put wires over rough terrain. And so that's basically the setup for it. It's a bit working class versus the AI kind of thing. It's a thing called Lapsus. I remember seeing a review of this and getting a pretty good review. But again, this is one I picked up for $5 or $10, I forget which. It's a small science fiction movie with a very tight focus. I'm looking towards those kind of movies these days. There are so many overhyped science fiction movies, and just one that is a little bit different and really doesn't get any traction for reasons that are beyond the control of the filmmakers is one I'm going to take a look at. There are other films I've seen like that lately, like Aporia, which really do give more than you expect for the low budget and the fairly cheap physical media you can get for them. Now this one's a comedy, and comedies can go one of two ways when they have really long titles. This one's called 7 Stages to Achieve Eternal Bliss by Passing Through the Gateway Chosen by the Holy Storch. And it's got a hell of a large cast of comedians in it. I don't know anything about it. I'm not even going to look at the back blurb. But there's your cover. It stars Kate McCucci and Dan Harmon, Dana Gould, Maria Bamford, Jay Lee, who else is on there? Mark McKinney, Brian Posehn, Mindy Sterling, Michael and Taika Waititi. Now, apart from the Taika Waititi, I'm on board for all of those people. And again, at that kind of price, I'm going to take a chance. Yes, I could probably wait until it turns up on a streaming service, but then it's the sort of movie that's not going to last long at a streaming service. And people are going to see it and possibly enjoy it and then go, where to go? I'm not going to worry about that because I've got a physical copy of it. Looking forward to seeing that one, mostly because I know zero about it, apart from the fact that the cast is loaded with good, not top tier, but good comedians. Next cab off the ranks, an anthology horror film. We all like anthology horror films. This one is a global anthology of dark folklore, so it's folk horror. featuring tales by the directors of The Lodge, In Fabric, Baskin, and more. Moore's one of my favourite movies. It's called The Field Guide to Evil. It's brought to you by the creators of the ABCs of Death. Again, it's going to be hit and miss depending on which particular story we're talking about. But I like anthology horror films as a genre, and I think I'm going to like this one. I may well do a longer review of this or some of the other films as well. But again, I know very little about it. Which directors have we got? Nobody who's particularly a named director. They're up-and-comers. And that's always interesting too, to see an up-and-coming film director and seeing one of their essentially short films put into an anthology series. And then later on, when they become big, you're ahead of the curve because you saw their anthology film from way back in the day. Next one's a French horror. The next one's a French horror comedy film by Michel Hazanavicius with Berenice Bejo and Romain Duris in it. Michel Hazanavicius is the guy who did the OSS Sans Decept spy movies with Jean Dujardin back in the day. It's a film called Final Cut. Basically, there's a Z-grade horror film about zombies being made in a factory, and the crew and the actors are really uninvolved with it until a real zombie apocalypse kicks in, and there goes the focus. I know Hazanavicius does good comedy and is probably going to be a little bit transgressive, but being a French language horror film, it's not really going to get much traction in a small Anglophone market like Australia. But I'm going to give it a go. I've been surprised by a few French horror films that have really delivered the goods, things like The Horde. And so I'm going to go with that one and just enjoy it. It's definitely got that horror comedy vibe about it. Whether it works or not, I don't know, but it's got strong violence, comedic blood and gore, and coarse language. So I'm on board for that. Now, these two I watched yesterday. I'm not going to talk much about them because I'm reviewing them for Saturday, but I will name check them. There's a French horror science fiction movie. Again, a bit of French action here from Umbrella, and I appreciate the fact that they're actually giving physical releases to non-English language films, even though this one has a kind of frame around it which is in English, but most of the dialogue spoken by the main protagonist, who is almost the only person in the film, is in French. So this one's a little film starring Gaia Weiss and a Mathieu Turi film. It's called Meander, which has the French spelling in France. And it's the story of a woman who's kind of hitchhiking along a road, gets picked up by a guy who turns out to want to kill her. And she passes out and wakes up in a tube. And she crawls along the tube. She's got a big kind of lantern / readout on her wrist that she can't remove. And there's a countdown clock on the readout. And she crawls through the tube and finds that she has to go through a whole bunch of hazards. There are fire hazards, there are acid hazards, there are water hazards, the tunnel squeezes to half of its size at times. It squeezes in another direction. There are hairpin turns in it. And then she finds herself being chased by something which may or may not be human. It's a nice little science fiction movie. I'm not going to talk about it beyond that. I'm going to talk about it on Saturday. That one you might want to check out because it's interesting. It's not big. It's not like an enormously budgeted film. It uses the special effects very well, and it ramps up the horror and the suspense well. But I said I wasn't going to talk much about it. Next one's a Russian children's science fiction movie, which I wasn't expecting to do because Russia, as we all know, is on the nose at the moment. It's a very special effects heavy movie, and it's got a look which is kind of slightly like an animatic in a computer game, but it's also got a lot of motion capture for a lot of the aliens in it. And there's a thing called Cosmoball, which is basically about an Earth that's been wrecked up because there's an alien creature who's been pummeled into the Earth. The moon's got somewhat shattered, even though the pieces are kind of hanging together in space. And the climate's shifted a lot. The movie is, for the most part, set in Moscow, which has got a tropical Brazilian-like climate. It's got tropical trees, tropical plants, tropical animals. Other parts of the world are differently endowed with either warm weather, deserts, or really cold weather. New York City is really cold. Australia, even on the East Coast, is a desert. And there's a sports event called Cosmo Ball where humans who can teleport go up against aliens. I'm not going to talk more about it than that. I'll talk more about it on Saturday. But it's got a very weird look about it. The production design's good. There's the back of it to show you. It's a kind of superhero / science fiction / sports ball movie. Like I said, I'm going to talk more about it on Saturday. So I'm going to talk more about it on Saturday when I do those 2 movies I just mentioned and a third one, which I'm going to mention now. Now, that's the stuff I got for Umbrella. And all of that cost me less than $40, including postage. So I'm pretty happy with picking those things up. Yes, it'd be lovely if everything was on 4K HDR, but it's not. And these movies are at least interesting. And I think that they may become rarer because they didn't get a large release from Umbrella. Most people don't know about them, so in the future they may well have a little bit of an added value, or at least an added bit of interest, because of the fact that they are quite uncommon. Next cab off the rank is the one I'm going to do with the other one. This is an Australian science fiction movie with basically one person in it. It's called Monolith. And this one wasn't released by Umbrella, it was actually released by Roadshow. Now, I'm not going to go into what this one's about, but people I trust have told me it's a good, solid science fiction movie, and I'm willing to believe those particular people. So I'm going to watch that one and review it for Saturday. And I just made a loud noise, sorry about that. The stuff I'm going to watch on Saturday, those last 3. Now, there's some other things I've watched this month which are kind of interesting, and I wanted to talk about them as well. The first one is a classic Japanese horror film, Kaneto Shindo's 1968 black and white horror film, Kuroneko. I watched that one last week, and it's really good. It's about a woman and her mother-in-law who are living on a small farm near Kyoto. There's a war going on. There are rogue samurais everywhere. And the 2 women, while waiting for the younger woman's husband, who's gone off to fight in the war against his will, get attacked by a bunch of rogue samurais. They are assaulted and murdered. And as they're lying in their burnt out house on their very small farming plot, a black cat comes up and licks them, and they become cat vampire ghosts, in a sense. The categories are somewhat different than European, so what they essentially are is cat vampire ghosts, and they start preying on samurai who wander through the area. There's a bamboo forest nearby, and they have a kind of haunted house in the forest. The younger woman encourages samurai to help her through the forest because it's very scary and there could be people there, and then invites them into the house where her and her mother-in-law give them dinner, give them tea, and she seduces them and then chews their throats out. This becomes a problem for the local shogun, and he sends out samurai to defeat these ghost women. Only one of the samurai is the husband of the younger woman, who has become quite famous and prominent and wealthy by being one of the samurai. And he's sent out to kill these 2 spirits, one of whom looks like his wife, one of whom looks like his mother. And the story gets more complex from there. It's beautifully evocative. The black and white cinematography is off the charts. It's a really fine piece of Japanese horror, and also a romantic story as well. Now, this being the Masters of Cinema, you've also got a booklet that comes with it. And the characters are really interesting. They really are well played. And the tragedy of the story of these 3 people is played really strongly. I really like Kuroneko. Apparently, it's almost like a sequel to Onibaba, the earlier film by the director. But this one apparently is supposed to be better. I do have a copy of Onibaba, which I haven't watched yet. But Kuroneko, I really recommend. This one is the English Masters of Cinema version. It is Region B, but totally worth having a copy of and totally worth watching. Now, I finally got a physical copy of my second Bumi Langit Indonesian superhero movie, which I've talked about in a previous video, and I got my physical copy of Sri Asi, the second Bumi Langit cinematic universe, and that's slipping out, science fiction superhero movie about a woman who gets possessed by the spirit of Shriyasi, a warrior who protects people against bad guys. I've talked about it in a previous video, but I really like having a physical copy of it. This one doesn't tell me which region it is, but I can play it on mine. Tons and tons of extras in this physical media copy of it, which I got from Amazon. You can freeze that if you want to. But yeah, I'm really happy to dive deeper into Indonesian superhero movies because it's one of my many, many cinematic passions at the moment. The last thing I've got for you is an indicator release that's just been released. And it's a movie I saw in the cinemas in the 1970s and remembered. Rod Taylor movie. So again, like myself, it's a boy from the western suburbs of Sydney made good. Directed by John Krish. Also stars Carol White and James Booth. And it's A Man Who Had Power Over Women, which is a really deep cut 1970 drama starring Rod Taylor at a time when he was mostly known for action films he was doing. Now, there's a ton of extras on this one, like literally a ton of extras. Well, not literally, but figuratively a ton of extras. Really obscure movie of his, which I've only ever seen before in physical media on a VHS tape. It's about an executive who works for a record company. They're trying to promote their new star, and he goes through some emotional crises, sleeps with a lot of women, and tries to come out of it a better man. I love the fact that Indicator is finding these films. A lot of people don't know they exist, but they're finding these films, finding the best possible originals to press from, and delivering obscurities which didn't get enough love at the time, and maybe which reflect the time in which they were made a lot more interestingly to a modern audience than they did to a 1970 audience. But I was really happy to get this one. I actually bought it on pre-release. It's got a booklet as well with a lot of essays about the movie. There's Rod Taylor there. This is around the time Rod Taylor was doing interesting films like Zabriskie Point for Antonioni. There he is there with a whole bunch of the women in the movie. Now, I've seen a very similar photo to this of James Coburn in one of the Flint films. They tended to do that with these kind of movies. You get the star, you get a whole bunch of starlets around them, you get a very happy looking star in the middle of them, and you do a press photo. But looking forward to watching that one. I'll probably watch that before the end of the week. Let me know if you want a full review of The Man Who Had Power Over Women, which is a somewhat ironic title. But so that's the haul I've got at the moment. I've got those cheap umbrella movies, which, whether they're fantastic or not, they're going to be at least interesting, and it's going to give a little more obscure depth to my video collection by having these movies that nobody knows about, but which entertain and maybe are more interesting and better films than a lot of the higher budget movies that have been pushed at us by various large entertainment corporations. So that's it for this time around. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and watch some of the playlists as well, because I've got a lot of playlists for various genres on the channel. There's over 500 videos there. To be honest with you, the quality varies because I'm learning to do this, and I'm hopefully getting slightly better most of the time I'm doing it. But there is a lot of stuff there, and before you ask me whether I've seen a movie, you might want to check out the playlist and see whether I've actually done a video about them. You can also support the channel by donating at YouTube or by becoming a YouTube member, and you can also become a patron at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies, and either of those options will get you my monthly Spotify playlist of groovy old music that I've listened to and enjoyed over the last month. So until Science Fiction Saturday, where I'm going to review those 3 movies I talked about before, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch some cheap movies, you may well be surprised. And I'll catch you next time.